Hi, this is Paula Gloria, and I'm welcoming you back to Part 2. Rabbit Hole Central TV came to Dayton, Ohio, and I'm coming to you from the Patterson Homestead, which is the home of John H. Patterson, who started National Cash Register. He was famous for the cash register, and the cash register was all about keeping track of profits. And one way they got so many people to buy cash registers was an aggressive advertising campaign. And they emphasized, don't tempt an honest man, sort of watch things. And they, even in this ad, it's interesting, they said, keep a national in your store. So national came to be equated with keeping track of things. So right now, I'm going to be introducing Bob Wagner, who's going to be talking about the dark side of the global warming kind of non-science or false science or fraudulent science when we're talking about man-made global warming. Let's keep track of who's profiting over something where the science isn't good. Would that be a fair way, Bob, of talking about it?
Yeah, we'll be covering
the science isn't right.
Yeah, politics, economics, and the dark side.
And also, I want you to elaborate or explain to us what's going to be happening in New York in March at Times Square.
Okay, New York in March, they're going to be having a global warming convention. It's put on by the Heartland organization. I've been trying to get invited there. I've sent them some of my work. So you can see some of the work. It's on my YouTube site called CO2 is Life. Some of our videos have been highlighted on Junk Science, highlighted by the Environmental and Public Work of the U.S. Senate and National Review.
Now, Bob, since this is so popular, it's embedded on all these players, and you're getting so much attention. Mm-hmm. At this event, is anybody going to be expressing the side that you're going to express?
Yes, this convention in New York City, it's put on by the Heartland Foundation, and it is essentially, they mock it by calling it the non-governmental panel on climate change. It is a convention of mostly skeptical people on climate science. It is something really worth going to if you're in New York City. And more importantly, if you put in a good word for me, maybe I can get them to have me as one of the guests. I've been working. I haven't been able to get invited yet, but I'm still working on it.
Okay, good luck for that.
And so,
thanks.
It'll be a lot of fun. And once again, the website is CO2 is Life. It's totally dedicated towards debunking global warming, or basically showing the science. I mean, I don't really pick and choose. I'm trying to give a good view of the science. This presentation is called Global Warming: The Politics, the Economics, and the Dark Side. First, we're going to take a look at the politics. And I think when you see how things are beginning to play out, you'll see that this is a quote from Lenin. The establishment of socialism in capitalist nations require only targeting their supply of energy. And I think when we start to take a look at this, and Rock, you mentioned going towards fascism. I'm not making that kind of a claim or anything, but I'm saying you'll see that the pieces of the puzzle work very well for a totalitarian government using this global warming science to push an agenda. And if you take a look, energy, Russia, an oil row hits Europe's supply. Okay? Russia and totalitarian states clearly understand the significance of the ability to control a people if you control their energy supply. Here at home, you can see, these are just basically two YouTube videos where you can see, in this one chart you see Maxine Waters saying we're going to socialize the energy companies. Over here you have Harry Reid saying, basically we need to do something about these energy companies. So you can see there's a drive towards the government having a greater role in supplying energy. Just to give you a background, this is one of the best videos I've found, and you can see it if you take the DVD. This is an interview of an ex-KGB agent back in 1980, and he describes the approach that the Soviet Union is using to help undermine America and the American civilization. And I stress that it was filmed back in 1980, but if you watch this, and then you watch how the politics are transpiring today, the techniques that they use, it's textbook right out of the communist little black book. Right? It's basically, once again, there's another video here. You can't see it, but if you click on it, if you have the PowerPoint, you can watch it. It basically comes down to...
This is on your website, right?
This is not on the website. This is on the DVD. I can put it out. I can get it out there for you to download. I'll give it to... Well, you guys have it to put out on the website. Basically, if you're going to go towards totalitarian state, that works on your fascist argument. there's certain things you need to control people. You need to be able to control guns. You need to have control of the government, control the media, the educational system. You need to control the military, medical care, pensions, food, jobs and income, energy sources, and housing. I put the bullets here because what I'm going to try to show you is that global warming legislation works beautifully into these three. Now, I'm not making a case we're going towards a totalitarian state or anything, but what I am saying is this is definitely steps towards it, or it could very easily turn into that. Okay? And once again, I want to drive home why this is so important. It's important because CO2 forms the backbone of all life. If you ever watch Spock, what does he say? We're looking for a carbon-based life. Okay? When you start to give the government control over carbon, you're giving the government control over the very backbone of life. And they're out there doing it. This is from the Daily Cause. They're telling you to tell the EPA to regulate CO2 as a pollutant. Now, I don't know why any human being on the face of the earth would ever say, by the way, I want you to regulate what I'm exhaling, breathing, eating, whatever. But every component of your life can then be regulated if it's turned over to the EPA. Okay? This is just to drive home. Remember, what you're breathing and what you're exhaling is CO2. CO2 is airborne fertilizer. That's what trees eat. Trees need it to survive. You pull CO2 out, all the trees die. Okay? This is a good example on how there's no limits to once you start to control this. They were out saying we needed to control the number of toilet tissues you can use in the toilet. That is, right? But it just goes to show you how
Goes along with that theory.
It just goes to show you how extreme or how it can this kind of legislation can influence every aspect of life. And this is just one great example. I put that up for humor, but you can see that depending on who's in the office, you've got to watch out. This is the other one. They're talking about, this is no joke, taxing cow farts. All right? New Zealand flatulent tax causes outraged farmers. All right? Once again, if you can regulate things down to the point where just passing gas can become a crime, you can get yourself in a whole heck of a lot of trouble. Okay? Over here it says cow emissions more damaging to planet Earth than CO2 from cars. Okay? Just think about how devastating that's going to be to the Mexican food industry or the bean industry. Those industries are going to be wiped off the face of the earth. Okay? All right, well, what's the real motive behind all this thing? I've given presentations to show you how bad the science is, but then it just started to beg the question, why would someone want to lie about this type of issue? Why would someone want to push this on the American people or the globe? I'm thinking, this doesn't strike me as the type of an argument a freedom-loving individual would want. They'd say, get the government out of my life, not bring it into even my bathroom. Right? Well, rarely do you ever find people with alternative, basically I would almost describe sinister motives, putting it all in paper and telling the world what they're doing. But if you look back, a lot of people have done that. Mao had his little red book. Well, Jim Hansen, the man who controls the data at NASA, did exactly that. He wrote Barack Obama a letter, and he published it. You can get it, I believe it's off the Columbia website. Here's the website that you can go find the link to it. NASA's Hansen to Obama. Use global warming to redistribute wealth. Right? I don't know what redistributing wealth has anything to do with fighting global warming, but it's clearly there's a political motive behind using this global warming to push a socialist agenda. Right? And I want to just go back and review one of the blueprints on how and why you do this. Tobacco settlement was a great example. You come out and you demonize the tobacco industry. You say the tobacco industry is doing this and that. You get the people to vote for a way to tax them. You promise them that you're going to fight tobacco with it, and the government gets a lot of money. The problem is that's what we did. We attacked the tobacco company. We didn't kill it. We kept it alive so we could keep taxing it. So we weren't really saving any lives. But more importantly, if you look at the amount of money spent on tobacco control, out of all that money they took, 4% were spent on it. So basically it was a way for government to seize assets from the private sector. Many of you probably had tobacco companies in your 401ks. That money went to the government whether you smoke or not. And tobacco is a legal product. They didn't make it illegal. They kept it alive. Okay? But the key is you attack the corporations, you then tax them, and the government gets the money. Right? Just to remind you, this is Jim Hansen. Jim Hansen's the guy at NASA that has Al Gore's ear. Okay? He's the one who was out claiming that they were censoring him. until someone looked at how many times he was quoted, and you can see he's been quoted over 10,000 times. He's kind of an interesting guy, is the bottom line. But this is the letter he wrote, Barack Obama. Okay, this is to Michelle and Barack Obama. Okay, and this is what he tells them. He said, the public will support a tax if it is returned to them, equal shares on a per capita basis. Basically what he's saying is, we're going to go out there, we're going to have this carbon tax, and we're going to redistribute it to the poor. That's not a bad idea. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm saying about hiding it behind a great lie is the problem I have. Okay? Any person, and basically he's saying that people that have large cars will pay more and will take that money and give it to the poor. Okay? A carbon tax has social benefits. It is progressive. It is useful to those who need it in hard times, providing them an opportunity for larger dividend for taxes. Does that make sense at all? He's saying this is a great thing. It's progressive, meaning it's going to fall more on the rich than the poor, and it allows people to avoid the tax. The people I know of that are least likely to be able to afford to avoid this carbon tax are the poor. They're the ones driving the trucks. They're the ones who can't afford to re-insulate their homes. They're the ones who can't afford these new light bulbs, and they certainly can't afford a Prius. So it wouldn't be progressive in my book. It would be highly regressive. The other thing that I find really interesting is it will encourage illegal immigrants to become legal, thus to obtain the dividend. It will discourage illegal immigration because everybody pays the tax, but only legal citizens collect the dividend. Does that make any sense at all? We have illegal immigrants right now, and they aren't receiving any dividend tax. Okay, they certainly wouldn't be here. That's not going to stop it. But more importantly, it basically is a path to amnesty. It's a way to get a large number of illegal immigrants to register and become U.S. citizens. Here's another one. A carbon tax is honest, clear, and effective. I don't know anything honest, clear, or effective about it. Taxing almost anything is going to reduce it, and if you're taxing economic growth, you're going to reduce economic growth. It will increase energy prices. Okay, it's effective, and I mean, he even says it's going to increase energy prices. Is there anybody in this room that wants to pay more for a gallon of gas? You want to pay more for your electricity? No. Okay, but that to Jim Hansen is a great idea. We're going to increase the price of energy, but low and middle income people especially will find ways to reduce carbon emissions. That's it. He states that again. That makes no sense to me at all. These are the least likely to avoid these taxes. Okay? The most effective way to achieve this carbon tax, he basically says the way to do it is basically tax it right on the barrelhead. So you're not taxing the corporation, you're taxing it it's essentially a national sales tax. If you think about it, this is a fair tax. It's just like taking a fair tax, and instead of taxing everything, you just simply tax gas. The problem is, with the fair tax, you eliminate all other incomes, and you just impose the fair tax. With this, it's just simply a whole other additional tax. That's the problem I have with it. I mean, it's actually a decent idea if you get rid of all the other taxes. Okay? And this is basically him just signing it. This is James and Annika Hansen. They put out a blueprint, what they want to do. It's essentially a way to redistribute wealth. It's a step towards socialism, and it's all in black and white. They don't even try to hide it. Up here in Columbus, we all know this one real well. They're using this as an opportunity. They've tried to get light rail passed for years. Everyone shoots it down, but now we get this crisis. They're using it as an opportunity to, I call it eco-looting, get the government to finally pay for something that the taxpayers have refused to do all along. You know, how you saying that's going to be a green type of transportation. Now, the one thing that's getting me real concerned about this is I started to take a look at who are the people that's being surrounding Barack Obama. Now, all along, I always thought Al Gore was doing this so he could become president. They would never really act on any of this because I looked at it and I thought the science is such a joke. I'm just thinking I can understand why you would do it politically to get the job, but once you get the job, you would kind of like forget about it. This doesn't look like what's happening. This is Barack Obama's climate czar has socialist ties, right? This comes from the Washington Times. She's a member of an international socialist organization, and it mentions in the article here that the picture was removed. Well, the nice thing about the internet is you can't really remove anything. If you hunt hard enough, you can find it. And sure enough, here she is, international socialist Carol Brunner. But this is what they say, and this is what's got me really worried. Right? Society, which calls for this is the international socialist. It's a society that calls for global governance. You know, when you talk about a new world order, okay, and says rich countries must shrink their economies to address climate change. I've never heard of anybody in power in the government saying, you know what, we need to start shrinking our economy. Okay? Shrinking economies mean high unemployment, but that's a deliberately stated policy. Okay? Hillary Clinton wants to do the same thing. Clinton vows to use cabinet position to push climate treaties. To show you what can happen when the government gets this kind of control, you see the city of Madison, Wisconsin, eyes draconian zoning ordinances to adapt to climate changes. Once again, you're starting to unleash regulatory, havoc on the U.S. economy. Right? But those are the politics. That's where I see going on. I see it's a giant push towards shifting the economy away from the individual and putting far more power in the hands of the government, a lot more revenues, and they're going to be taxing pretty much every aspect of our lives. Let's take a look at the economics. What's actually going on behind there? This is a title, this part, The Road to Serfdom. This is a famous book by F.A. Hayek, one of the Austrian economists. And he basically outlined how do societies end up in serfdom. Well, we're going to take a look. Does this work into it? Okay. Well, in a nutshell, this is what you can go. President-elect Obama proposes economic suicide for the U.S. I couldn't put this any better. When you have people surrounding you saying, we want to shrink the U.S. economy, they're telling you what they want to do. Okay? This cartoon captures it pretty best. Okay? I'm not sure what we should call this climate bill. We need a catchy phrase to hide the cost. Okay? Why don't we just call it the Asian Full Employment Act? And that's essentially what's going to happen. If you're a U.S. corporation, they're going to start hitting all these taxes. What are you thinking? You're getting on the phone to China. You got some extra room over there? They're going to say, we got a lot of extra room. Ship all those jobs over here. Let's talk about the costs. The cost to reduce, now this comes from the IEA, the International Energy Administration. They're talking, now you saw the science, and you saw how bad it was. I wouldn't spend a red nickel on fighting climate change. You want to know how much the IEA is proposing we spend on this? $45 trillion. To put that in perspective, you know how big the global GDP is? It's 60 trillion. That's 3/4 of the global GDP. That is 3 times the U.S. GDP. That's the size we're talking. And why is it economic suicide for the U.S.? Because if you're going to have a carbon tax, who do you think is going to pay the tax? Probably the country that produces the most carbon. That's what I would think, right? Well, everybody knows who's the big boy on the block. The U.S. That's basically saying we're going to take all our wealth and shift it to the third world. Okay? India, China, Mexico, they're going to get all the revenues, and we're going to be paying all the revenues. Now, I've never thought that would be a great idea for us to simply start shipping U.S. dollars overseas for no reason, especially if we're funding some countries that are relatively hostile to us. Okay? And if we're going to spend $45 trillion, don't you think you want to really make a difference? I mean, we could spend $45 trillion to try to pull CO2 out of the atmosphere, or we can spend it to educate people, health care, pay down the debt, develop drugs like an AIDS vaccine, tax cuts and rebates, okay? Shore up Social Security, Medicaid. Now that would be, to me, a real difference, because there's nobody in this room can tell you what's going to happen if you pull CO2 out of the atmosphere. You can spend $45 trillion and you have no idea what the results would be. I guarantee if you spend $45 trillion on these things, you'd get results. Okay? This headline basically captures it best. Forget climate change. We should spend it on nutrition. We got people starving in the world. We don't need to start, we don't need to start wasting money. All right. Getting on to what the dark side of this is. Hey, this is Barack Obama's carbon ultimatum. This was in the Wall Street Journal. And what he points out is that you can use this legislation to do a lot of harm to the government. And what they're proposed here is that what Barack Obama is going to do is he's going to come up there and he's going to say, look, because remember when first time they took the Kyoto Treaty to the Senate, it went down in flames. I think it was 98-0. Nobody voted for it. Well, they're proposing that what they're going to do is Barack Obama is going to say, look, you either go along with me or I'm going to unleash the EPA. The EPA is like the nuclear option. And it points out here, the EPA hasn't made it secret about how it would like to centrally plan the U.S. economy under the 1970 Clean Air Act, the Environmental Protection Agency. Okay, they've made it no bones about it. It's a regulatory industry or agency. What do they like to do? They like to regulate. So they literally have plans that they call nothing short of centralizing the economy. In a blueprint released in July, the agency didn't exactly say it would collectivize the farm, but pretty close. Okay? Remember the totalitarian control, you got to control the foods. Okay? Carbon tax and all this regulation falls severely on farmers. This comes from the EPA's own report, published just last July. And they took a look at what the cost would do. Okay? Excluding only the 200,000 largest commercial farms, our agricultural landscape is comprised of a bunch of 1.9 million small farms. Okay? Okay? These operations simply could not bear the regulatory compliance cost that would be involved. The EPA is saying, if we do this, we will kill the vast majority of family farms. That's not me saying that. That's not some right-wing wacko. That's not Rush Limbaugh. That is the EPA saying this is the nuclear option for the family farm. That's why I call it farm raid. And what kind of costs are you talking? You're talking the EPA cow tax would charge $175 per dairy cow to curb greenhouse gases. They're going to tax hogs, sheep, chickens, everything. Now, when you tax a dairy cow $175, who do you think is going to pay that? Farmer's not going to pay it. He's going to pass it on to who? Consumer. Exactly. But what farmers could possibly afford this? They need to have economies of scale to overcome this kind of stuff, right? Corporate farms will be the only ones that can survive. Small little family farms can't afford these regulatory costs. I think this one also points out that they have something called a Title V permit. Now, that's just the tax, is $175. These small family farms would have to hire people who can go around for compliance to make sure that their cows aren't passing too much gas. Can you imagine the regulatory nightmare of these small family farms? You know, the hogs would be driven out of business. I mean, hog farmers driven out of business. Beef, everything. All right? Here's just in the Wall Street Journal. Dave was good enough to pass this one on. Cow tax uproar underscores greenhouse gas divide. They're already getting armed out in Iowa. They understand this is coming after them in a big way. And good old Senator Grassley saying, we're going to fight this one. We see where this is going. Bottom line is that drives up food prices. Hey, we got starving people in this world. We don't need to be driving food prices up for them. We should be figuring out ways to get them more food. Right? Here's another one. We just saw how he had a socialist on his administration. This is the new next regulatory czar, they call him. His name is Cass Sunstein. When you take a look at him, and this gets into the hostility towards the farmer, he is a very staunch animal advocacy. I'm not arguing against animal advocacy or not, but I'm just saying what could happen if this person is in charge. Animals should be permitted to bring suits against human beings as their representatives. He's literally an animal rights activist. He thinks that animals should be able to sue human beings. I'd like him to watch the Nature Channel, because if you want to see some abuse of animals, watch what happens when a lion goes after a gazelle. There'd be a lot of lawsuits being filed out in the animal kingdom. We ought to ban hunting. He would like to also ban hunting. Okay. Once again, that type of a person in a regulatory environment could do a lot of harm. I mean, just a stroke of a pen can wipe out beef. I mean, anything that grows meat could be wiped out. Okay. Okay. That's the agricultural. That's the one that I see being hit the most and most had the largest impact to us here in the heartland. Agriculture is definitely on the block. The other thing is, once again, if you get the DVD and you click on this, it'll show you the coal and utility companies have their sights on it. I believe it's 50% of all coal traffic or railroad traffic comes from the coal industry. 50% of our power comes from coal-burning power plants. Right? So as you can see, one of the main things was jobs. If you can regulate carbon, you can have a huge impact on those jobs. So once again, the people who work in those industries are totally dependent upon the government. This is the one that really you saw a lot during the campaign, where there's a big fight about clean coal and what we should do with coal-burning power plants. And you had Joe Biden saying, no more coal-burning power plants. Well, the one that was most interesting, if you get this presentation and you click on this, there was this famous quote about Barack Obama saying he was going to bankrupt the coal-burning power plants. It says, if somebody wants to build a coal power plant, they can. It's just that it will bankrupt them because they are going to be charged a huge sum of money for all that greenhouse gases that are being emitted. Barack Obama said in the San Francisco Chronicle, January. Now, I've given this presentation, people say, oh, you're taking them out of context. If you click on this, this is the entire interview, and I'll let you be the judge for yourself. But clearly, there's a huge hostility towards the coal-burning power plants. And here you have coal. And the PowerPoint, if you just click on it, move them. They'll have to download it, download the PowerPoint presentation, and when you play it, all you do is you click right on the video.
Where? From where? www?
Can we put it out on your website? I don't have a website I can host it right now.
Okay.
Or Dave,
we'll
can we host it on yours?
We'll work it out then.
I'll try to get it out on Dave's, and we'll send you a link.
Okay.
But as you can see, once again, controlling energy is what it's all about. If you control energy, you control America. By attacking coal, the government immediately controls 50% of your power. Okay? Oil. Okay? Alternative energy sources are basically non-existent. And yet we're going to bet the entire U.S. economy on these small little slivers, like we can suddenly get solar. And by the way, you will never see a jet fly on solar power. Maybe going out on a limb on that one. But there's just certain things you will not be able to replace, and you will always require petroleum. Yeah, mass-free. There we go. And here's just basically saying, you know, this is what I find so ironic about this. We're all in an uproar about high gas prices. But that's not bad if you're on Al Gore's side. He actually wrote a book, Earth in the Balance, where he said he wanted a $5 a gallon gas because it forces to get off of it. Well, if you haven't noticed, people really don't like paying higher price for gas. And as you can see, coal is basically non-existent on the cost structure. Okay? Oil's cheap, gas is cheap. Solar is off the charts. Okay? If they impose their carbon tax at the level they're talking, and you work it out, you could almost double. Because down here it's talking about the scrubbers, how much it costs if they're going to impose this regulation. You would almost double the electric bill in many parts of the country. And once again, they keep saying how it's good for the poor. I don't know many poor people that can afford electricity to begin with, let alone doubling their cost. Right? Also, when you get in here, you get into all these unintended consequences. And I put this one in here for a couple of reasons. One, we always heard about these biofuels. And I put this one in because I encourage everyone to go to Time Magazine. Now, this is no right-wing rag. This is no Rush Limbaugh. This is Time Magazine. And go look up the clean energy scam. All right, and what you'll see there is it describes what happened when we had this push to biofuels. Now, if I say biofuels, it has a warm and fuzzy feeling. Oh, it's so nice. It's these renewable energy sources. Well, the problem is that renewable energy source was food. We started burning food. And Barack Obama's telling me we have a famine, so we've got a famine while we're burning food. But the problem is the free markets respond in a big way anytime prices go higher. If prices go higher in something, they want to produce a heck of a lot more for it. That's the beauty of a free market. The problem is when you pass this biofuel thing, it pushed up the price of food. When it pushed up the price of food, they had to expand agriculture to provide more food while we're burning the food elsewhere. Well, who do you think produces the most ethanol in the world? Brazil. And guess where the rainforests are? Brazil. So we literally started hacking down the rainforest in order to save the earth with our biofuels. And that's no joke. I encourage you to go read this. It's one of the most heartbreaking stories you'll ever read about the devastation biofuels have caused to the rainforest. Okay, this is, I call it Deathanol, just to give you a quick rundown, to show you what really goes into ethanol. You could feed a person for a year for what it costs you to fill up a car. Okay? It takes 50 pounds of grain, okay, to get, 2.6 gallons of ethanol, which has a lower EPA than normal. So as you can see, multiply that out times, a 30, 40 gallon tank, you could literally feed a person for a year for what you spend to fill up a car just once. And by the way, you produce a lot of CO2 when you produce that. The other thing that I find, as far as unintended consequences go, they're talking about fighting all this stuff by carbon sequestration. Who knows what carbon sequestration is? They're talking about taking the CO2 from these utility plants and pumping it underground, right? Essentially doing what? Turning the globe into a giant aerosol can. Well, the problem with that is, what is CO2? It's plant food, but it's also a poison to you and me. Well, guess what? Mother Nature sequesters carbon herself near volcanoes. And every once in a while, she burps, and she lets this CO2 out, right? She did it over on Lake Nyos a few years ago. 1,700 people died, right? And yet we're sitting here talking about going around and putting these basically environmental nightmares all over the country around power plants. We've seen them done that. Now, mortgage crisis, as far as the economics. Now, I would make the argument, and I'm going to just show you why I make this argument. I would argue that the current economic crisis or banking crisis that we're in today has a large part to do with global warming and what we've done to fight global warming. I know that sounds like I'm reaching for it, but take a look. All right? This is back on January 18, 2007. House Democrats finished first 100 hours agenda by passing oil revenue bill. All right? So the Democrats, they took control of Congress. They have their first 100 hours, and then they announced to the world what we're going to do. And what they announced to the world they were going to do is they would successfully close Thursday evening with passage of legislation designed to force oil and gas companies to pay more for royalties and to offset offshore leases and end subsidies and tax deductions. Basically, they said, we are waging war on the U.S. oil companies. Here's a chart of oil. Right? This is the invasion of Saddam. Okay? This is Iran threatening to use oil as a weapon. It's falling like a rock, and it immediately reversed itself on that date. And market never looked back. From this day forward, it tripled in the next year and a half. And what happened on this day, marking the absolute bottom in this correction of the oil market, that was the end of the first 100 days. The markets took a look at what they were going to do to the oil companies, and the price of oil never looked back. I mean, rarely do you get to see something so coincident as to the day the markets never looked back. And they went higher from there. At the same time, we had the corn craze going on. Remember, we had the biofuels. Ethanol was the big craze. Price of corn was shooting through the roof. Right? Now, if you remember, if you follow the CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, which is a measure of inflation, you often hear them refer to the volatile food and energy prices. So global warming led to the attack on the oil companies, and it led to biofuels. They drove up the most volatile parts of the CPI, food and energy. Well, we've seen what it did to the economy in the past. Anytime you had an oil spike before, you had recessions. Okay? The bigger the oil price shock, the harder we fall. Okay? Most importantly, though, we know the devastation an economy can do, oil can do to an economy. Inflation drives up mortgage rates. So what happened? You drove up the price of food, you drove up the price of oil, mortgage prices followed, foreclosures surged, and the mortgage crisis collapsed. The only reason we had higher interest rates and the only reason we had higher inflation was because of the biofuels and the oil. Almost every other cost was going down. So I would argue that global warming was a large part on why we have this most recent market correction, or basically economic crisis. The other thing is, who would have thought, the other thing about a totalitarian state, you got to control housing? Well, who would have thought that cement is the third largest producer of CO2 out there? It is. Okay? So once again, if you work in construction, your jobs could be taken over by the government. As you can see, concrete cure for global warming. You can see CO2 is a huge product of cement production. We already see what's going on with the automobile industry. If you work in the automobile industry, your jobs are at risk because of all this global warming. Right? Actually, Al Gore wants to eliminate the internal combustion engine. Well, I got news for Al. People are working that industry, producing those engines. You eliminate it, you eliminate their jobs. Okay? But clearly, the automobile is the enemy of these people that support global warming. Okay? Here's a nice little piece you can read about it in the Wall Street Journal called The Environmental Motor Company. And they're talking about how what we're doing is we're trying to drive our auto industry into these environmentally friendly or efficient cars, basically through legislation. Now, what's the problem with that? I'm thinking, why would this guy argue against efficient cars? Well, the problem with that is we build big cars that Americans like. The Prius only sold 1 million cars. The world market is 50 million cars. There just simply aren't enough Prius Prius buyers out there to support the auto industry. You're going to lose a lot of jobs. Okay? The other thing is, as you can see, if we go to this green economy, we're not necessarily going to be the ones that win. Here's what GM's going to do. What do you think GM's going to do when they're shifting to a green economy? They're going to need to buy volts for their batteries for their Volt. Guess what? South Korea is going to be making those batteries, not Detroit. And this is where I have the most problem with it is. One, I drive an SUV. I love it. Okay, I hope they keep making them. But the problem I have is, in the U.S., if you want to have all those workers working, building cars, our workers are extremely expensive. This is basically the wage differential between us, the U.S. auto manufacturers, and the Japanese. We're paying $75 an hour. They're paying $42. The question you need to ask, though, is how did we survive so long? Just until a year ago, GM was doing fine, Chrysler was doing fine, all these cars were doing fine. The reason we were doing fine is because Toyota, Nissan, Honda, they would make the little economy cars, and we would build the SUVs. By building the SUVs, you made a lot of profits, and you could afford a lot of high-paying jobs. Competing with the Japanese, you're going to have some huge wage cuts. Okay? And more importantly, you're forcing our auto manufacturers to go away from what they do best and can afford the high jobs to competing with some very tough competition with low-paying jobs. So essentially, we're basically just telling our auto manufacturers to go, like some general saying, march into that front line and go against the worst, most fierce competition you could ever imagine. And the reason we're doing that is because we have these private organizations, which I call no skin in the game. We have the Sierra Club and Greenpeace telling our auto manufacturers what they should be producing. But they have no skin in the game. You think they couldn't care less if they go bankrupt. And that's the problem I have with it. If they want to build an economy car, let them go do it. But don't allow the government regulations to take their ideas and force people who are putting their money at risk to do what they want them to do. If they want to get in the game of auto manufacturers, do it. Because here's just the headlines. As expected, Toyota beat GM. We don't want to force our auto manufacturers to go against the toughest competition in the world. This just gives this as a clip you can watch, and it goes through and it shows you how their attitude about that. Who cares? Let's go fight them. Go into that competition. The point is, none of these people have a skin in the game. Their jobs aren't at risk. The other problem is, once you start saying CO2 is the pollutant, we're the largest world polluter, what do you think the lawyers are going to do? They're going to have a heyday, and it's not going to be our lawyers. It's going to be lawyers in China, Russia, India, who are saying, let's go after these guys. They're the fat cats. They have the ability to pay, and they'll go after us. Not only will foreign countries come after us, California will come after us, and they always have. We're on the verge of bankruptcy, and California sues automakers for global warming. I just have a different set of priorities. I'm thinking about the people losing their jobs and the people who want cars, not this global warming, and I'm certainly not going to cost jobs over the science. All right, now let's take a look at the dark side. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm a conspiracy theorist or anything. I'm just simply going to show some things. Not saying that there's a likelihood that they're going to happen, but I just want to show you some things that are out there, that are happening today, that I find very ugly. There's two videos here. If you click on them, it basically gives you a good rundown on some of the dark side. The first thing is, it gives me creeps thinking about the government tracking me. People hate these national ID cards and things like that. Well, they're already figuring out this is a thing from the Air satellite. This is a carbon tracker. They can start tracking carbon. It gives me an eerie feeling thinking about the government's going to be watching me exhale and how much carbon I'm producing. And what happens if I start exhaling too much? They're going to come after me. They're going to get Big Brother knocking down my door. But this is the Air satellite. They're tracking greenhouse gases. That strikes me as a huge waste of resources. Think about what you could have done with this money for some useful product. Okay? Groupthink. And this is what I experience a lot. People like me generate a lot of hostility. You either think like me or we're going to come after you. Say all these nasty things. Just go look at the YouTube site. They post all these nasty things. Okay? The bottom line is, I like to think as science is the free examination. It's just a process of exploration. I don't want people telling me not to look into things. When they do that, I start to think there's something wrong. Okay? But if you watch this video, it does a very good job. And by the way, this is from PBS. It's called it's on Frontline called Heat. And if you want to, and once again, you know, I said how Jim Hansen had that one, is rarely do you see them show their cards. Watch the show Heat, and watch who sponsored it, and watch the attitudes of these people. And if you want to get a true feeling for what this is all about. So when I say there's a totalitarian movement going on, just watch this show. It's a PBS Heat. There's a lot of, this is where I get most of these clips. They do a very good job outlining what their intent is. Okay? This is a groupthink argument. Okay? Global warming gag order. People have been threatened with their credentials, their professional credentials for disagreeing with the science. Global warming skeptics under fire. Exxon cuts ties to global warming skeptics. In science, you're supposed to explore things. You're not supposed to sit there and say, don't look at that. That's the whole purpose of it. Academic intimidation. And when I talk with a lot of people in this field, they all experience this. I mean, literally, you're being told, knock it off. Exxon pulls plug on climate flat earthers. And I'm going to love headlines like this in a few years because the flat earthers, we're going to be proven right. All you got to do is look at the global temperatures. We're going down in a big way. All I can say is the data supports the global warming flat earthers. It doesn't support the global warming believers. Weather Channel climate experts calls for decertifying. I mean, this is totalitarian stuff. You don't think like me? Go after them. Here is, I'm saying Barack Obama is surrounding himself with some people that get me a little concerned. Well, this is that one gentleman that we talked about earlier that he's assigned as his climate czar. This is a list of the books that he's published. Now, this is the book. This gentleman goes out and spends a large part of his life writing books about things. Okay? Nudge is a book about how the government and private organizations can help you make the right decision. Basically saying you're stupid, you don't know what to do, so other people can make up your mind for you. The Second Bill of Rights, FDR's unfinished business. If you take a look at what he considers a right, I think it would be very alarming to most Americans who believe in individual freedom. This is clearly a huge push towards socialism. Radicals, and this is the one I love, radicals in robes, why extreme right-wing courts are wrong for America. Let's have a debate. Don't sit there and shut people up. Why society needs dissent. Free markets and social justice. All of these books that he writes have a very socialistic tendency towards them. This is... Well, socialism to me is, the definition of socialism is when the government controls the means of production. If the government controls the means of production, it gives a huge amount of control over the individual. You work for the government. You receive your food from the government. Everything comes from the government. Like if you look at France, they have a socialized energy company. It's all nuclear power. You don't have any say in whatsoever. You get nuclear power. But what I have a problem with it, takes control from the people. Yeah, it's socialism, not individualism.
Wait, Paul. It's a technical thing. If you're going to talk and ask questions, I don't want to. But wait. Then I've got a mic here.
He's making little errors when he talks fast, and he's saying the opposite of what he means. That's what I'm trying to catch you on.
Yeah.
You said it gives people more freedom with socialism.
Oh no, socialism
That's what I
takes all the freedom away. Yeah. It's very anti-individual. It's very anti-freedom.
Okay.
Socialism, according to Marx, is an intermediate step between capitalism and communism.
Okay.
It's going that direction. And to me, it's going the wrong direction.
Okay.
You look at our economy versus any socialist economy, and we dominate. This is the other thing that gets me really frightened, and I see it on a daily basis. I have a young son, 3 years old now, and I get to see this. It's shocking. If you watch these children's channels, you would think the only issue facing the world are these environmental issues. This is the global challenge on a Nickelodeon. Here is a website that says ABC website tells children that they should die. Okay? Because if you go in here and if you enter in what your carbon footprint is, it literally will tell you you should die if you hit a certain level. So kids are going over there, entering this thing, and they're starting to feel that, oh my God, I'm killing the earth, I should die. But that's literally a website that's out there. But I see this on a daily basis, and I'm shocked by the amount of focus on this global warming stuff on these children networks. The dark side here is when you get into this politicization of science, they've done it before. This is a great example. This is called Global Warming as Pathological Sciences. Talks about one of the famous Russian agricultural engineers and how they literally starved millions and millions of people based upon junk science. over here is a great quote that I always use. Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. Okay? To me, this argument of man causing global warming is an absurdity. Once you get people to believe that, you can make them do very bad things. Okay?
Who is that quote from?
I believe it's Voltaire. Yeah, it is Voltaire. Okay? There are truths which are not for all men, nor for all times. Okay? And why is there such a dark side to this? Well, it all gets back to this economist called Malthusian, or Malthus, Thomas Malthus. Right? And a lot of books have come from that. Al Gore's Earth in the Balance, The Population Bomb, Paul Ehrlichman, Soylent Green. Those are all comes from that. The whole theory is that Earth can't support man. Man is not part of nature. He's an enemy of nature. Right? When I was a kid, I was taught that by now we should have every square inch of arable land should be covered by a human being. Well, he was dead wrong. And one thing I give whenever I give this presentation, and it happened when we were in New York, every time I give this presentation to a live audience, all I do is I sit back and I wait for the environmentalists to bring up population control. And I thought that was really weird. Thinking these are conversations we should have known not to have, a long time ago. I mean, 1930 Germany should have told us that's not a conversation you want to have. But it kept happening. And then I was at Penn State University last month, and I'm giving this presentation, and I found out why everyone keeps bringing this up. This one biology professor comes up to me, and she goes, well, from the presentation, I'm not going to be teaching that chapter anymore. I go, chapter? What are you talking about? She goes, well, we teach that in class. I go, teach what? She goes, population control. I about hit the floor. I go, what do you mean you teach population control? She goes, we teach population control in biology class. I go, you're kidding me. I didn't believe her. So I went home and I looked up this is a copy of a biology book, Human Reproduction Biology, population control, population control. It's all over the place. I went to Google and did a search, Amazon.com. How many books are on population control? 37,000 books. Okay? Population control. How many people are too many? Over the criticized environmental groups for not addressing population control. This is a guy saying that he's criticizing environmental groups for not pushing population control enough. Effective way to fight global warming, population control. Group calls for population control to stop global warming. These are not the kind of conversations I would think. I mean, if you want to sit there and stop the debate on anything, that's the kind of science I would want to stop the debate. We've been there, we've done that, and it's not pretty. This was in the Dispatch just a couple months ago. Limit births to save Earth. Okay? Population control agenda. Eco-extremist wants world population to drop below 1 billion. In order to get below 1 billion, you know how many people have to die? Okay? This is Dr. Pachuri, the IPCC. Humans blamed for climate change. If you get this downloaded, if you download this presentation and you click on it, you'll see him discuss that. And he says, humans are to blame. And he says, quote unquote, we've got to do something about it. Enemies of the state, babies, okay? Children not good for the planet. This is the sickest stuff I've ever seen. I mean, I would understand this if this was Nazi Germany, but this is today's newspaper. This is Time Magazine. This isn't Rush Limbaugh. This is Time Magazine. Okay? Here's an expert who wants a sterilization credits for carbon. Sterilization for carbon credits? I mean, this is mainstream media. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking this should be considered the most extreme stuff ever. Baby tax to save the planet? That's you can just start to see the absurdity where it goes. This was a nice piece you can get. It's called the warm turns. You know what I'm saying about the people that Obama's surrounding himself gives me a little worried. In a speech at Harvard University last November, Harvard professor John Holden. Now, John Holden, I encourage you to do a search for and find out who this guy is. That Population Bomb book was written by a guy named Paul Ehrlichman. co-authored many things with this guy, the author of the Population Bomb. President-elect Barack Obama's choice to be his science advisor as director of the White House Office of Science and Technology presented a top 10 list of warming solutions. Okay? So they asked this guy, Barack Obama's right-hand man, what is a solution? I turn a key on that word solution for global warming. Population control. Population control, to me, is not a solution to anything. I mean, we've already seen a final solution once. We don't want to see it again. This is just if you want to do some more research on the internet, this is the New York Times, certainly not Rush Limbaugh. they dig into who this guy is, and they don't like him. And once again, that's the New York Times. Okay? This basically just points out how he co-authored some things with Paul Ehrlich, the author of The Population Bomb. Now, I'm saying a bunch of things. I'm saying, and you always get the response, that's so extreme. I know it's extreme, and I'm not saying this is going to happen. But what I can do is I can point to, even if it doesn't happen here in the U.S., you got to remember there are totalitarian states out there that don't honor our customs and principles. China wants to get carbon credits for aborted babies. Now, they have a one-child policy, and because they have a one-child policy, they feel that they deserve carbon credits for killing their babies. Now, you don't have to be, some right-wing wacko to sit there and extrapolate out what this means, especially when they're telling you that you can't discuss the science anymore. Anyways, I could see over in China, all of a sudden, all these dissidents, these political dissidents, they're producing too much carbon. They got to go. Handicapped people, they got to go. You can just see this is the stuff that happened back in the early 1900s that led to the Holocaust. If I was to tell you that you can get carbon credits for aborting babies, wouldn't that get you a little concerned? I certainly hope it does. This is a video. Once again, you can click on the video and you can hear a gentleman discussing it. Okay. Al Gore highlights it in his own movie. This is the population of the globe. He uses, by the way, non-logarithmic charts that really dramatizes how it goes. The other thing I have a problem with this is the anti-democratic, anti-rule of law, anti-private property rights attitude of these people. This is Al Gore. This is at one time our next future president. This is the man who was wanted to represent America and all that we stand for. And what's he telling young people to do? I can't understand why there aren't rings of young people blocking bulldozers and preventing them from constructing coal-fired plants. Okay? If you have a disagreement with it, at least in my American way, we have a court system to handle this. You don't get a bunch of young children to go out there and tie themselves to bulldozers. And that certainly isn't the type of responsible behavior I would expect from a one-time presidential candidate. Okay? We have laws in this country. We have private property rights. We should honor them. If they don't like it, go change the Constitution. They also are destroying, in my eyes, science. Okay? The impartiality. We've got a person here, Jim Hansen, I've covered him quite a bit, who is a huge partisan. He's distorting the data. He's distorting the science. He's distorting the conclusions. And the problem is all that's going to come home to roost. And what's going to happen? It's going to destroy the credibility of NASA. Okay? This is, once again, you can look up this is on the website. It's called Painting by Numbers, NASA's Peculiar Thermometer. It gets into how Jim Hansen massages the data. And so you can see, do we really want to drag down the credibility of NASA, credibility of science, all because of this? The credibility, or what I call the betrayal of the public trust, you've got the federal government buying into this in a big way. We've got the UN promoting all of this. Academia's behind this. The media's behind this. The environmentalists are behind this. Science is behind this. Nobel Prize organizations are behind this. Are we going to really risk the credibility of all of these organizations? I mean, you know what happens when you lose faith in your government? I mean, we saw what Nixon did. I mean, it destroys generations' attitudes towards the government. Okay, the UN is going to destroy the credibility. We already had the food for oil issue once. Will they be able to withstand this issue? Okay? But those are the concerns that I have. Those are the things I want to bring up. Once again, I'm not saying any of this is going to happen, but I just wanted to make you aware of it. And once again, just take a look at the science. It's not there. And if we're going to spend $45 trillion, let's spend it on something that really makes a difference, not this nonsense. All right.
Thank you.
Now that's the first time I've been through that presentation. I was asked to give it last week, and I'm giving it tomorrow.
Okay.
So I would really like some feedback on that one because that's the first time I've given it.
Just so you know, it's not a half an hour, it's almost an hour.
Almost an hour.
That was an hour?
54 minutes.
Wow. Okay, so now we're going to do some Q&A. I'm particularly interested in what Rock has to say or think or ask about this presentation that Bob Wagner just gave us on the dark side of the science behind global warming. What do you think of that? Because I know you tend towards left liberal sentiments.
I do. And I think that the presentation that you gave about the carbon footprint and the fallacies behind the science is eye-opening. It really is. I did have some I did take some issues with some of the things that you said about. I see I'm a little disorganized about what you're promoting in the second half of your lecture, in terms of you seem to come out anti-dissent and pro-SUV, and I'm just not sure what purpose that has. It almost sounds sort of like hooray gluttony, but I don't know. I mean, because of the overwhelming conspicuous consumption. And
Can I
don't
just
know
put
whether
my
it's,
2 cents
sure.
in that, just because we only have 6 minutes? You don't want to have austerity have people ashamed of being part of the planet. That's what I would say. And that economies don't have to shrink if our science is right. And that, more in one place isn't less in another place. Although we do support, Molly and me, mass-based energy.
Well, let me answer.
Mass-free energy. Mass-free energy.
That's a very good point. And I don't want to sound like I'm supporting conspicuous consumption in any way. I mean, I am all for conservation. I'm all for all those things. My whole purpose is to say, if we're going to do it based on, honesty, fairness, and accuracy, don't hide behind, global warming as an excuse. So if you want to eliminate the SUV, just be honest with the American people and say, look, we're going to eliminate the SUV because of this. But my problem with that is they're eliminating because of why? Because of CO2. I wouldn't want to cost a bunch of jobs over CO2. We can probably find better ways to conserve and keep people working and increasing the livelihood, standard of living, instead of tearing them down. And I see this as a way to tear down standard of living, not building up. You can conserve.
But Bob, I totally love your science and what you're saying about this. But there are bigger solutions. For example, wealth doesn't come from labor. Wealth comes from capital ownership. So oftentimes when you hear the word distribution or redistribution, people freeze up and lock down, and they think there's only one way or another.
Well,
That's the jobs overseas. I think all of us on the globe should participate in a higher lifestyle based on more harmony with nature and more enjoyment of the resources. We shouldn't be ashamed to be breathing.
Sure.
We shouldn't be ashamed to exhale.
Well, and I also think, I know Paula disagrees with this. I got a loud voice. That I don't know about population control, but I think that people should have access to, ways to not have so many children if they don't want to. It seems like people are, because of fundamentalist groups, aren't allowed access to birth control.
Oh, there's no argument with that at all. My point is, do you want to have the government deciding that for you? And the reason I put that one up there called Enemy of the State, I encourage everybody to go read this piece called Enemy of the State. It tells you about how China, this one right here, Time Magazine, Enemies of the State. I said that there's that one piece in Time Magazine about the biofuels. This is the other piece you want to read. It's called Enemies of the State. It has the most graphic and horrifying description of this poor woman in China who was about to have her second child and what happened when they knocked on her door, when the government representatives knocked on her door. Read that piece. I can't even tell you what it says, but if you want to see the horrors of what this could lead to, you read that. Being a new father, it burned a memory in my mind that I'll never forget. It's horrible.
So I understand what you're saying is that.
I got a huge buzz just then. Go ahead.
Probably because he just dumped all the cable on the floor while he was holding it.
Go ahead.
So my understanding is you're saying that you like the ends of what the idealism of this particular regime that's just coming into power are aiming for. You just don't like the means by which they're getting there.
Sure.
I think they're all saying well, gee, Bob, we have a lot of momentum on this whole environmental thing. Let's keep that ball rolling because everybody's really believing that literally the grass is greener on the other side. But that argument is gonna fizz out against some other science. But see, you have two ebbs of the flow. You have two ebbs and flows based on this peak of interest in this particular topic, and then the interest is going to be in the science that you're producing, on the next flow, on the next high tide of truth revealing or whatever they're going to call it.
Well, the way I would address that is, what's the likelihood of this continuing if you have double-digit unemployment in 4 years? What's the likelihood of this continuing if you destroy the family farms? What's the likelihood? The cost that this is going to impose on society America just won't stand for it.
Well, but the
And my-
statistics.
Like we want more freedom. I want raw milk. Right now, to have raw milk, you really need smaller farms. The cows should be grass-fed, not grain-fed. Upper state New York, which is an ideal place for cows to be raised for dairy farms, they can't survive. And you have the dairy farms going to Arizona, which is not a natural place for cows, but it's a natural place to put in, miles and miles of agribusiness. And you know what they're doing up in upstate New York? They work in the prisons. They're getting jobs in prisons. So the more you make people criminals, if you're trying to grow a prison industry, so the more you make these kinds of laws, I think that's the point. 1 minute.
Well, I'd like to just comment that I think Bob's presentation illustrates what's going on in the country now. In my opinion, anyhow, and I think the facts bear it out, is this whole global warming is nothing more than a hoax. And I think the science proves that. And there's an agenda that's going on right now, whether you want to connect it with the Democratic Party and the new regime, Obama administration that's coming in, or take it on a larger scale. And I think the whole bottom line is that there's a movement out there to create a new tax to get control of three key components: energy, food, and water. And they want to control that, and they want to be able to tax it. And I think we're starting to see the ramifications of it right now with the stock market.
Great.
With
Well, thank you, Dave. I got to wrap it up because we're running out. But I'd say to people, if we're going to have change, I think change is a fine thing. Let's just keep our eye on it and make sure that we proceed with knowledge. And I want to thank Bob for giving us a lot of knowledge here at Rabbit Hole Central TV.
I can't thank you enough.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Did we
And
make
thank
it?
you, Paul.
Yeah, we made it.
Oh, good.
I mean, we're just.
No, I
now,
appreciate it.
Now it's, you can talk as much as you like. It's about to go up.
Okay. I just
Good.
that's good that you bring that up. Just that the control is going over food, energy, and
Yeah, food and energy and of course water. There's three components they have to control, and those are the three key components. And once they
how do you control water with the global
well,
warming?
it's one of the things that they're trying to do right now. And if you go look and see that a lot of people now are talking about the Boone Pickens, with all the wind farms and whatever, getting that control down there. That was really about him